Cool. Hi, everyone. So welcome to this workshop aimed at helping you create and use your own lithomancy set. My name is Jess Howard. I'm the author of the book, The Art of Lithomancy, which was released at the end of May this year, so not that long ago. This is one of my first times doing anything like this, so bear with me. I'm also kind of coming towards the end of a cold, so I will try and mute myself if I feel a coughing fit coming on. But I'm also terrible with technology despite working in tech, so we will see how this goes. So this is going to be a whistle-stop tour through the world of lithomancy, as there won't be time to go through it all, and I'll be keeping the detail quite top level. Excuse me. So if you do want to find out more, then I obviously recommend the book. Again, it's called The Art of Lithomancy. It's one of the Pagan Portals titles. Or you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is @ the little @ symbol, the Cottage Mystic Witch, all one word, after my website, which is www.thecottagemystic.com. So feel free to come and check that out too. So that's hopefully the end of the general pluggy bits. Again, thanks everyone for joining. I'll be taking kind of questions and comments at the end because I do have a bit of a presentation to share as well. And if I'm sharing the presentation and focusing on that, I'll probably miss your comments, and I don't want to do that. So yeah, thanks to everyone for attending. Anything you've got, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll just dive straight into it. I apologize as well for the very boring background, kind of the home office. Moved into the house a couple of years ago, and it's been on my list forever to do. But yeah, sorry, you're stuck staring at me and boxes of cables. Hopefully, this won't be too information overload. There is a lot to go through. Lithomancy is a really quite in-depth subject. Yeah, so apologies. Going to throw a lot of information at you, but again, feel free to ask questions. You can catch up with this stream or rewatch it afterwards, or yeah, follow me on Instagram or connect with me via the website. Always happy to kind of answer any questions that you've got that you may think of after this. So what is lithomancy? Lithomancy is basically divination with stones. Not a lot is known about the history of lithomancy, and you may find that you've actually come across lithomancy before, but without realizing what it was called. So the earliest form of this practice is said to be traced back to the Romans, and there are several tales of stones being used to tell the future. However, this is a far cry from the divination practice we mean when we speak of lithomancy today. Unfortunately, we're lacking any sort of comprehensive historical evidence to tell us exactly how lithomancy has changed and evolved through the centuries. And on the one hand, this is quite frustrating, especially for someone like me who really loves researching these sorts of things. But on the other hand, it's quite liberating, as it gives us a real opportunity to play and experiment and build a practice that's unique to ourselves. So lithomancy is often described as a visual and intuitive practice. We cast our stones and interpret our reading based on the patterns that the stones form when they fall, which is the visual side of things, and the influences and messages of the stones themselves, which is the intuitive side of things. As such, lithomancy is great for complete beginners and more experienced practitioners alike. So there's many reasons why I recommend giving lithomancy a go. Firstly, it's free. You can just use stones you've collected from your garden or whilst out for a walk. Whilst lithomancy is traditionally performed using stones, many practitioners use crystals, and some, like myself, will incorporate other small items such as shells and coins into their sets. And this is another reason that I love lithomancy. It's really creative. If you're just using regular stones, you can grab a Sharpie or some paint and decorate them however you want. You can create different theme sets, such as one specifically for love divination, a general reading set, or a set specifically to give you answers about your career, for example. And you can then assign any meaning you want to the stones or other items in that set. So there's probably what I would determine to be 3 main types of lithomancy sets. The first is the yes-no set, which does pretty much what it says on the tin. So for this, you'll need at least 2 stones, one to represent yes and one to represent no. You may wish to use another stone for maybe, and you also may wish to include a personal stone. So a personal stone is simply a stone which represents you in a reading. If you choose to use a personal stone, and I usually do, then you'll start your reading by looking at the stones which have fallen closest to the personal stone once you've cast them. If you don't want to use a personal stone, then you would instead focus on the stones which fall closest to yourself when interpreting your reading. But there's a whole section on interpreting your reading a bit later on, so we'll come on to it then. Cool. Okay, so yes, no set, very simple, very straightforward. The next type of set is known as the traditional set, and this is where I am going to attempt to share my screen. So let's give this a go. Share screen. Should be screen 2. Allow. So hopefully that will come up for you in a second. Yep, there we go. Excellent. So the traditional set is made up of either 13 or 16 stones, and it uses the planetary influences and some other more general life elements as the meanings for those stones. If you are using 13 stones, then you would use 7 stones to represent different planetary influences. Those would be the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn. And then the remaining 6 represent place, love, magic, life, luck, and commitment. If you're going for 16 stones, then you would use the above, but we have an additional 3 planetary influences, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So, for example, you'd have a stone to represent Mars, and that would symbolize individuality, assertiveness, ambition, and dominance, among other associations. So I do go into a fair bit more detail about the meanings behind each stone in the traditional set in my book, but the traditional set could be seen as a great place to start if you still want to physically create your own set, but want some structure and guidance with the meanings for each stone. I will say, though, that each stone has a large number of keywords. So whilst it does bring some structure, it can also be a bit overwhelming. So here I've just got a couple of slides which show the associations of the traditional set. So for example, for the Sun, we have masculinity, energy, purpose, success, and leadership. However, there are another 5 or so keywords that I'm missing off from that list alone. Another thing to note with the traditional set is that the stones have both positive and negative connotations. So whilst the Moon, for example, represents femininity, memories, and the home, it also represents anxiety, moodiness, and fickleness. With so many different meanings, you would probably have to employ your intuition a lot more to interpret a reading with a traditional set than if you were creating your own set and starting off with more limited meanings. So if you do want to use the traditional set as a guide, then I would probably recommend taking just 1 or 2 of the keywords to assign to your stones, especially if you're trying lithomancy for the first time. If we take a look at this second slide here, there we go, you'll be able to see that we've got the 6 stones there that don't represent planetary influences. Those are place, life, magic, love, commitment, and 2, 3, 4, 5. I seem to have missed one off there. Never mind. Anyway, so these help us determine where in our lives the influences of the planets will be present. And this is a good division to bear in mind when you are creating your own set. It's good to have a combination of messages and areas of your life represented within your set. And you'll hopefully see where this was relevant in the next section, making your own set. So the third type of set, and the type that I tend to focus most on, is what I call freestyle sets, which I appreciate is a very imaginative name. But these are the ones that you create completely from scratch. So there's no rules, no limitations, and no end to what you could include. Making your own set from scratch is going to be the main focus of this workshop, so I thought I'd take you through the process, albeit in not quite the level of detail it deserves, otherwise we'll be here all afternoon. So I have a couple of sets which are made out of nothing but stones, again, just stones that I found in my back garden. And if I'm going down that route, then I will usually collect the stones first and then focus on the meanings. But for the purposes of this workshop, I wanted to mix it up a bit and include other items than just stones in my set. So in these instances, I will usually focus on the meanings I want each item to have, and then find items that correspond to that specific meaning. So the first thing to do is to decide what sort of set you want to create. Do you want to create one to do with general readings, or perhaps you want to create one which is specifically focused around a certain subject, such as love divination? Again, for the purposes of this workshop, I'm going to go with a general reading set. If you're partaking in this as a workshop rather than a talk and are making your own set, then feel free to use the same meanings and stones that I use, or you can use them as a guide for creating your own set. So in order to help us assign meanings to our stones, I find it easier to start with keywords. Hopefully we've got another slide. Yes, we do. So have a think about the sorts of questions you may be asking and the sorts of answers you may want to receive. For a general reading set, I want it to A, highlight messages, and B, give me guidance about key areas in my life. So this would be a great place to start with keywords. Most lithomancy sets tend to have about 12 or 13 stones in, but you can have as many or as few as you want. The main thing is that you can hold them all between your hands when you cast them. Okay, cool. So I'm going to build a general reading lithomancy set, and I need my keywords. So what sort of things would I want to pop up in a general reading? What areas of my life are most important to me, and what sort of messages would I like to receive from this set? So after reflecting on that for a bit, I came up with the following keywords. So we've got communication, strength, self-care, career, self-discovery, abundance, opportunity, intuition, joy, emotions, relationships, health, and protection. So now we have a basic understanding as to what we want our stones to represent. We can then expand on those meanings. I personally like to do this through meditation. So I will meditate on each word and ask myself, what is the message here? It needn't be a long process, but connect with your intuition to guide you in honing in on the meanings of these specific stones. You also don't need to write pages and pages for your meanings either, although there is no harm in doing that if you wish. Even just a couple of sentences will do when you're starting out. So usually I will wait until I've decided on the meaning of each stone before I choose the actual stones, crystals, etc. Again, if I'm using more than just stones. However, again, for the purposes of this workshop, I thought I would go through the meanings alongside the stones I have chosen. Also note that I'm about to show you some stones which have already been decorated, but I do recommend waiting until you get to the actual kind of assigning the meanings to the stones, which is a bit of a physical process and will come a couple of steps later. So at this stage, you should just have blank stones. And this is what I ended up coming up with. So, and let's see if this actually works. But for communication, I'm using a piece of blue lace agate there. Hopefully you can kind of see it in the camera. So blue lace agate, generally associated with communication. Our keyword, communication. And then the expanded message would be there may be a need to work on your communication skills. Do you feel like no one is listening to you, or you aren't able to get your points across? Focus on improving your own communication style and how you communicate with others to succeed. Cool. So next up, we have a keyword of strength, and I'm just using a piece of red tiger's eye. I'm not sure actually holding these up to the camera is working too well, so apologies. So keyword again, strength, and then the expanded message is you may face challenges or be stuck in a difficult situation, but now is not the time to shy away or back down. Now is the time to be strong and to face whatever is coming your way and seek to overcome it. The strength you need is there. You just need to find it. Cool. So next up, we have self-care, our next keyword. And for that, I have chosen a piece of moonstone. Its associations with femininity always makes me think of self-care. So again, the expanded message for this is it's time to focus on you, what is best or most important for you, and to prioritize that for now. So quite short, quite sweet, to the point, but that is all the level of detail you need when you're starting out. Cool. Next up, we have career. And for career, and again, hopefully you'll be able to see this, but I've just gone for a regular pebble there and I've drawn an arrow on it. For me, the arrow kind of represents forward progression and movement, which is where I want to go with my career. So the expanded message of this particular keyword is your career is at the forefront now. Ask yourself if you're happy with what you're doing. Can you envision spending the majority of your life working in this career? If not, it may be time to reevaluate your position and find something more aligned to your own passions and values. So our next keyword is self-discovery. And for this particular keyword, I have gone with a little limpet shell there. So the limpet shell represents kind of taking a look at what you've got in your life and whether it's worth holding on to and whether it's worth letting go. So it naturally has that element of self-discovery to it. So the expanded message for this particular keyword is to take a look at your own feelings, biases, and beliefs, even the negative ones, before you proceed. Try to understand and learn from them before you make your move. Next up, we have abundance, and unsurprisingly, I've gone for a small 5p piece here to represent abundance. But it does represent abundance in a more general sense. So it may not necessarily be financial, but it will most likely be something rooted in the physical world. So for example, if your business is struggling because you can't afford to pay your staff for all of the hours that you need, then it may manifest in someone offering to do some volunteer work for you as opposed to receiving more money. Cool. Okay, so our next keyword, and I promise we're almost there, is opportunity. And for opportunity, I've gone with a piece of tiger's eye there. So the expanded keyword message for this is that fortune is smiling on you, and you either have been or will be presented with a great opportunity. It may be an opportunity you are uncertain as to whether to take, but this stone tells you that fate is on your side. Be brave, be bold, and go for it. Just on a bit of an aside, hopefully you might have noticed as I've been holding these up that they are all kind of roughly the same size and the same weight. This is quite important to bear in mind when you're selecting your stones and other kind of items to include in your set, just to give it a more kind of even reading. So next up, intuition. I've gone for a piece of amethyst, well known to be a crystal associated with intuition. So the expanded message of this particular stone is whatever situation you find yourself in, you need to look at the bigger picture and not just the immediate. There may be something you're missing, and if there is, then your intuition will guide you to the best resolution. Trust in yourself to make the right decision either way, but make sure you have all of the information available to you before you make that decision. Okay, next up, our keyword is joy. I've gone for a piece of sea glass to represent this. I personally love the beach, I love the sea, but unfortunately kind of living in a big city, I don't get to visit it that often. So when I do and I find a piece of sea glass, it's usually a cause for mini celebration. So the expanded message here is an unexpected message of joy, some happiness that will soon come your way. So if you find yourself going through a difficult period, then hold on, things will get better. So again, quite short, quite sweet, and to the point. Cool. Next up, I have a few more which are just stones. So the next one is relationships, and I just have a plain red stone that I found in the back garden to represent relationships. The expanded message of this is you need to reach out and build relationships with other people if you want to succeed. This may not necessarily be romantic relationships. It may even just be networking at events for work purposes, for example. Cool. Next up, we have emotions. This is actually a small little shell that I have here, maybe too small to even see on the camera. But the expanded message of this is emotions and the emotional state, especially emotional freedom. And it may be that you have or will have to deal with a loss. It's time to accept it and let it go if you want to move forward. Okay, I promise we've just got a couple more left. So the next keyword is health, and I've just got this plain green pebble to represent health. So when this appears in a reading, the expanded message is simply the need to focus on health. This could be physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional health. But when it appears in a reading, anything health related will be at the forefront. Okay, and our last keyword is protection. And for this, again, just another pebble I found in the back garden. And I don't know if you can see it too clearly, but I have drawn an equal armed cross on the pebble, as that is a kind of general symbol of protection. So when this stone appears, the expanded message is that there is something bubbling under the surface that you should be wary of. This could be something completely unexpected, or it may be something that you're aware of, but may be underestimating. So be careful, be cautious, and take steps to protect yourself as you progress. The last one that I have is my personal stone. So this is actually a piece of lodestone. So lodestone has magnetic qualities, so I kind of visualize it as pulling the correct stones and their meanings towards myself when interpreting my reading. So yeah, I use a piece of lodestone as my personal stone, but you can use anything that you want that has meaning to you. So again, I appreciate that I'm just kind of bombarding you with information. Again, this will all be up afterwards, so feel free to come back and check it out and let me know if you have any questions afterwards. But for now, we're just going to take a look at a few more kind of next steps. So we have our set. We've built our set there. We've found our stones. We've come up with our keywords. We've expanded on their meanings. So what's next? First off, we need to cleanse our stones. There's many different ways that you can do this. My favorite ways of cleansing are using either incense smoke or salt water. Salt water may not be appropriate for some materials, so make sure you check beforehand if you are planning on using this method. But essentially, get whatever you're using, and as you wash your stone or pass it through the smoke of an incense, for example, visualize all negativity being removed from the stone, leaving it a blank slate. You may also wish to state your intention, something along the lines of, I cleanse this stone of all negativity in this world and the other worlds. May it be blessed in the name of the universal power. And you should do this for each of your stones. So once you've done this, you can now actively assign the meanings to your stones. And remember, I said this is actually quite a manual process. So I find meditation, again, the best way to do this. So simply hold your stone and focus on the keyword and the meaning you are assigning it. See the stone becoming imbued with the message you want it to represent. If it helps, you can even say it out loud. So for example, if I take my protection stone, I could say, I imbue this stone with the meaning of protection. When it appears, I will know that there is something bubbling under the surface that I should be wary of. This could be something unexpected, or it may be something I am aware of, but may be underestimating. I should be careful, cautious, and take steps to protect myself as I progress. This is also the time to decorate your stones as you focus on the message to help strengthen its meaning and your connection to it. Now, one thing to note here is that you may find that the stone tells you a completely different meaning than the one that you wanted to assign to it. You may find yourself focusing on health, but the word relationship keeps popping into your head. If this happens, then roll with it. It's actually a really good sign. It shows that you're already forming a connection with your stones and using your intuition to listen to their messages. It may mean that you need to rethink that particular stone or find another stone to represent what would have been health in this example. But again, just go with it. So we're now ready to start casting and interpreting our readings. So we'll take a quick look at how you cast your stones. As I said earlier, we're keeping this quite top level. There's still a fair bit that I'm missing out, but this should at least help you kind of get the general gist of it. So first off, you want to make sure you have the right physical environment to cast your stones in. You want it to be light enough that you can see the stones and their markings. I find that having to strain my eyes because I've got the lights too dim can break focus. Also remember that you're using stones and crystals and such that could crack. And so to avoid damage, cast your stones onto a carpet or a mat of sorts. But you don't want your surface to be too soft or thick, as you need to ensure that the stones can kind of move around and roll a bit. So a really thick carpet would be too restrictive. Oh, and on that note, make sure you aren't casting anywhere a stone could get lost under the sofa, never to be seen again, as that is a real pain. So to cast your stones, simply hold them between your hands. Pick this up, see if I can do a bit of a demonstration. So yeah, just kind of hold them between your hands and just kind of roll them around almost as if you were shuffling them. You want to hold them at about chest height and have your hands straight out in front of you, just so again, you're creating that space for them to move. Focus on your question, and when you feel ready, just let them go. Once you've done that, give them a chance to settle, and then it's on to the interpretation. And I've got some photos on the slideshow. Apologies, they're not the best quality of photos, but yeah, hopefully they will at least help demonstrate the concepts that I'm talking about here. So the first thing to do is locate your personal stone if you're using one, or the stone closest to you if you aren't. Remember, we read the stones closest and then focus on reading outwards. So in the picture, you can see my personal stone. It's the very dark one there, almost black. We can see that the stones for health and the coin there have fallen closest to that personal stone. So we'd start off by looking at those. We can then see that the limpet shell there and my stone for protection have fallen kind of the next furthest out. So we'd move on to those. And then finally, we'd move on to the pebble that's kind of up in the right-hand corner there, as that's the one that's fallen farthest away. So this can represent kind of one or two things. The first is importance, with the more important issues being the ones that are closest to the personal stone. Or it could be time. Those that have fallen closest to the personal stone will manifest quicker than those that have fallen farther away. So you'll need to use your intuition to determine which, but I do tend to find in readings, it is often importance that this represents. So once you've found your personal stone, the first thing I recommend you do is look for any patterns that the stones have formed, and this is the visual. There are some patterns that I've found appear quite often, and they do have basic meanings that you can use as a guide. So we're just going to go through some of those. Cool. So first up, we have the square. So you can see here that we've got our stone for protection, which is the one with the cross there. We've got the green stone, which represents health. We've got our coin, which represents abundance. And we've got moonstone, which represents self-care. So the square represents foundations. It tells us that these things need to be in place before we can continue. So We've now identified our square pattern, and it's time to now employ our intuition to interpret the meanings behind the stones and how they influence one another. So I would say that this particular setup is highlighting the need to focus on money and the need to be sensible, the stone of protection there. So am I protecting my finances and putting myself in a financially secure position? The moonstone represents self-care, meaning that I need to put myself first in financial situations. It may be perhaps I'm spending too much money on others, which is putting my finances at risk. And then we've got the stone for health there. Remember that this could be health, not just in a physical sense, but in an emotional sense, in a mental sense. And so here, this could indicate that it's having an impact on my personal well-being. So the square representing foundations tells us that this is a situation that we need to get in order before we continue. So the next shape that we will focus on is the triangle. So in this triangle, we've got the stone for career, which is the pebble there with the arrow on, the limpet shell, which represents self-discovery, and the stone for relationships. I appreciate you can't tell it's a red stone in this picture, but it is the red stone. So triangles represent opportunity. When these appear, the foundations are already laid, the groundwork is set, and now we have an opportunity to embrace. So in this instance, we have the stone for career. So this opportunity is most likely focused around my career. The limpet shell here represents looking at your own biases and judgments, and the red stone represents relationships. So I would personally interpret this to mean that there is an opportunity in my professional life. However, I need to evaluate my attitude, my strengths and weaknesses, and especially my relationships with other people. And I should seek to improve these if I want to be in the position to take this opportunity and make the most of it. Cool. Okay, so next we're going to be looking at curves and straight lines. So we've got here the personal stone, which is the very dark colored one on the left as I'm looking at it. We've then got the stone for communication, and then the stone for relationships, the stone for opportunity, and lastly, we've got the stone for intuition. So when we looked at the triangle and the square, we could see how the meanings of the stones, were all interconnected. Lines and curves, however, have a much more linear progression. So my communication impacts my relationship. My relationship is then related to this opportunity, and this opportunity is then related to intuition. It's much more of an A to B to C to D relationship between the stones. So in this instance, I could say that I need to focus on my communication, finding my voice and communicating what I want. And I should especially do this in my relationships. Through this improved communication and the current state of my relationship, I will find that an opportunity will become open to me. However, when I'm looking into this opportunity, I should use my intuition, as I may be missing out on something big picture wise. And all of this will play out in a very kind of one after the other linear fashion. Okay, so curves are very similar. But with curves, we get a bit of a clue as to how easy or challenging this progression will be. So we can see we've got the personal stone there at the top, and the stones are curving downwards. So this could represent either A, a nice easy way forward, or B, a dip in energy. Similarly, if we move the personal stone down, we can see that the curve is now moving upwards. So this could represent either an uphill struggle or a high energy level, a working your way to the top. Again, this is where you'd use your intuition to tell you which one it is, and it probably won't be the same in every reading that you do. So interestingly, I've had readings where the stones have done this kind of spirally sort of shape, which is always interesting from an energy flow perspective, as it indicates very clear ups and downs as you progress. Doesn't come up too often, but I just like it as a pattern. So the final one that I want to look at is one that I call split paths. Again, I'm not very creative in my naming of these things. But yeah, this one I've called split paths. So if we take a look at the top, we've got the stone for career there, the one with the arrow. And then we've got the shell stone for that kind of self-discovery element, our limpet shell. And then to the right, as I'm looking at it, sort of my right, we've got the stone for communication, and following that, we've got the one that represents abundance. However, to the other side, we've got the stone that represents strength, and below that, the stone which represents protection. So as you can see, it kind of goes straight down and then it splits off, hence split paths. So we can see that this is to do with my career and that I need to focus on my own weaknesses, strengths, biases, and such, and work to understand them before I continue. Now, depending on what I do, there are two paths I could take. The path to the right with the stone for communication there looks quite positive. So I would interpret this as meaning if I do this initial self-discovery work and then communicate my hopes and fears, this will lead to much more abundance in my career, potentially a pay rise or a promotion or whatever. However, if we look at the other path, we've got the stone that represents strength there. So we could interpret this as if I just kind of come in all guns blazing, this could potentially lead to issues and I'll need to take steps to protect myself in my career. So I deliberately chose stones which give more of a good path and a bad path. But actually, a lot of the time that the split path appears, it isn't that black and white. It's literally just you have two choices and here's what will happen based on which choice you make kind of thing. So those are all the patterns that I wanted to go through. To summarize, we have squares, which represent foundations, triangles, which represent opportunity, straight lines and curves, which represent linear progression and energy flow. And we have split paths, which represent a one or the other path progression. So there are other visual clues that you can look for when interpreting your reading. For example, does your stone have any cracks? You can't see it too clearly in any of the pictures, but my moonstone has a chip out of it. So you could say that if it lands chip side up, then it may represent more of a challenge than if it lands undamaged side up. Similarly, if your stone has any decoration, like my protection stone there, you could say that it landing design side down indicates challenges, whilst design side up represents smooth sailing. Or perhaps your stone has some discoloration, such as my blue lace agate does. I think you might just about be able to see it in the picture. If so, you could read that discoloration indicating slowness to manifest, whereas it landing bright side up could represent a quicker resolution. Or they may mean nothing at all. And again, this is where your intuition comes into play and will tell you whether these aspects of your stones are relevant in a reading, and if so, exactly what they mean. So there is another way of performing lithomancy, and this one is done using a grid, kind of similar to a pendulum grid. In fact, here is one I made earlier, and when I say earlier, I mean a few years ago, as you may be able to tell from the wear and tear. So this is great to use if you need a quick overview or at the end of a larger reading to make sure that you haven't missed anything. When reading for other people, I will usually do the reading as explained previously and then finish off by casting the stones onto this grid. And the majority of the time, the grid confirms what I gleaned from that main reading. So you cast your stones in the exact same way, but there are some slight differences. For example, you don't need a personal stone. Rather than using a personal stone or reading the stones based on where they fall in relation to yourself, we read them based on the grid itself. For example, those that fall close to the center are more likely to manifest quicker or be more important, whereas those that fall closer to the outer edge of the grid are more likely to manifest slower or are of lesser importance. I tend to ignore the stones which fall outside of the grid, but sometimes those that fall very close may still be relevant. And again, use your intuition to tell you which one it is. If you have a stone which falls between two segments, you can apply that meaning of the stone to both of those segments. Because this is a general reading grid, I have gone for aspects of my life which are more general, and you can see some of them mirror the meanings of the stones. So we can see there my stone for communication has fallen in the career segment. Pretty straightforward. I need to focus on improving my communications in the workplace. We've got the stone for self-care in health, and it's quite close to the center. So this could represent that the best thing I can do for my health right now is to take some time out to relax and focus on me. And this should be a priority for me right now, considering how close it's fallen to the center of the grid. On the other end of the scale, let's take the stone for opportunity and put it right up here. You can see there it's on the edge of the wealth segment. So we could say that this indicates an opportunity to make some money, but it will only be a small amount, or it may not be on the horizon in the very immediate future. Finally, you can see the stone for relationships there, which I've kind of put between or on the line between love and ego self. So this could represent the need to perhaps check myself and how my view of myself and my insecurities affect my relationships, especially romantic relationships. So you can use a grid to represent anything that can be segmented. You may wish to create one with 12 segments, one for each month of the year, and cast onto that to get an overview of your upcoming year. Or perhaps you could split it into 4 to represent the seasons, or 8 to represent the Sabbats. You can use cord to create a temporary grid on the floor if you don't want to make a permanent one, or if you want to use something bigger. Although, trust me when I say it is much more difficult than it sounds to get the segments perfectly equal. Cool. Okay, so I think that's probably it for the slideshow. I appreciate that we're kind of coming up to time, so I don't know if anybody does have any questions or anything. Otherwise, I do have a few other bits that I can say. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Cool. Any other questions or anything? Otherwise, as I said, I've just got a few other bits that I can kind of have a chat about to make up time. Cool. Okay. Well, again, just to kind of recap, the book Art of Lithomancy is currently out with Pagan Portals, goes into a lot more detail on some of the subjects that I've touched on here and detail on subjects that we just haven't had time for. Again, if you're interested in lithomancy, then please follow me on Instagram. Again, the @ symbol, the Cottage Mystic Witch, all one word. I personally, I've been practicing lithomancy for years, and it's quite interesting how, despite how kind of ancient its roots are, it is a very kind of underappreciated or unheard of form of divination. I mean, if you go to Instagram and you type in #tarot, it comes up with over 17 million posts. But if you type in #lithomancy, it comes up with just over 5,000. And I'm pretty sure that most of those 5,000 are me. So I'm always really keen to meet people who are also into lithomancy. So yeah, I mean, it'd be great to see other people kind of sharing the sets that they've made and asking for advice on meanings and kind of doing readings for other people. So if lithomancy is something that you practice or you want to practice, then please do connect with me. Would absolutely love to get in contact with more lithomancy practitioners. So again, just a couple of other things. So the first is that lithomancy is a form of divination. I haven't touched upon it so much in this workshop, but there are additional things you can do to help strengthen your readings, such as burning certain incenses or incense, anointing yourself with certain oils, regular meditation, etc. In terms of storing and maintaining your stones, so I know that most guidance I've read on storing divination tools tells you to keep them covered and keep them somewhere dark. I found that this isn't an absolute necessity when it comes to your lithomancy set. I mean, I tend to just kind of keep them in a bog standard pouch like this and stick them on my altar. I will admit, apart from cleansing them for the first time when creating the set, I usually don't cleanse my lithomancy stones. I'm kind of the opinion that every time you use your set, you're forming a deeper, more personal connection with it. And so for me, cleansing just feels a little bit counterintuitive to that. But again, that's just a personal preference thing. And I suppose I'll say on that note as well that I never actually let anybody else touch my lithomancy set. So even when I'm doing readings for other people, I'll kind of have them sit there or kind of do it long distance, but I will more act as a conduit for the energy of that person rather than having them interact with the stones. And again, I've never felt the need to cleanse my stones after doing readings for other people, but that doesn't mean that the need may never arise. If you get a particularly negative client or someone whose energy just feels off, then you may wish to cleanse your stones just in case. One last comment on reading for other people. Always be considerate of your client's feelings and balance that with giving them the true meaning of the stones. But also don't let clients make you second guess yourself. If you communicate a meaning to someone and they say, that doesn't sound right, read it again, I recommend that you stick to your original guidance. So to second guess your readings is to kind of second guess your intuition. And at that point, I can tell you from experience that your whole reading will just fall apart. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Trust your visual clues, trust your